Pass it back, that's all they did, he didn't ever said a word in the whole class,
Just-
everything was done off the mimeograph. And he had a heart attack, and nobody noticed all day long. I mean, he's just dead in his chair. They just went up there, grabbed the stacks, passed them back.
Well trained.
Okay.
So Lupe won't be here tonight, Jim,
Yes.
Lupe won't be here tonight.
Oh, okay, thank you. And Melissa, you can set me up to record? I think all I'll do is just turn this thing off. I don't even have the button. I'll go from here. Okay, well, it's 6:01. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. And, we have seats in attendance. And
Sam just walked in. No.
so. Okay. Let me do a roll call. Guadalupe and Ron, not here. Liz Gray,
Here.
Arto,
Here.
Don. Here. Dawson, Summer Sigler,
Here.
Samantha Torres.
Present.
Thank you, and James Sanders, okay. Thank you. The first order of business is approval of the agenda. So would you please look over the agenda in today's packet? If there are no objections. I object. Okay, Don? In the agenda packet itself, we do not have the minutes for March 5th. We do not have item F1. Okay, the minutes from March 5th, I have in my hands. They were not in the packet.
We can read them and, or offer 5 minutes for people to read them.
Or we can wait until they're
Yeah.
actually issued to the public so they can review and comment on Zoom at the next meeting. Okay. So there's been an objection raised and Don would like to have them postpone the reading of the March 5 minutes postponed until the next meeting in order to have them put in the packet and available online. So. And item F1. It's an attachment. Which was just handed to us. Okay. I'm.
For the Brown Act, Mr. Chair, these are. Let me start over. 7-Eleven Committee and most of the West Contra Costa committees are really great about everything that they put out for the agenda packet. They actually put it out in advance as opposed to just the agenda. The agenda is the actual only thing that's required. And then whatever we show, we actually go over these resource documents. We include in the minutes as part of the agenda packet. So the public is getting an invitation to, with just the agenda, to comment on not just the minutes, but also on the initial report. But it is not it is on the agenda for the, under D4. So.
We've invited the public
The
via
public will
Zoom
see
to
it
comment.
at the same time that we see it.
So we have invited the public via Zoom to comment, but they don't have access to these documents. And we have not had access to them until just a second ago. For purposes of simply distributing them without discussion. I've got no problem with that. Okay. So, there are other materials, enrollment materials that I brought, that I would like to distribute, and again, not necessarily discuss. So we can put that off until the 23rd. So item,
So that-
D4. And, the resource document mentioned in F1 will be postponed until the meeting of April 23. In order for, the documents to be available online and for members of the public to comment as well as members of the committee. Is that satisfactory?
Yes, it is. I do have one other item on the agenda that, I'm sorry, it's not an objection, except here. Can we use a larger font? Can we print this so we can read it? I mean, a 2 or 3 point font is, shouldn't have to use a magnifying glass. If please. For those of us that are nearly blind anyway.
Oh,
Agenda
okay.
with the minutes of next. D4. F1.
All right, so as amended, if there are no objections, we'll adopt the agenda as presented with the exception that item D4 as referred to in F1 will be postponed until April 23. The contents of F1 will be posted online for public comment. If there are no objections, so ordered. And now let's move on to the approval of the minutes. March 5 minutes were not available, so those are postponed. March 19 minutes were available and were part of the packet. So with the, there was a small handwritten correction that I made with respect to my background, and other than that, I have no other additions or corrections. Anyone else? Okay, so if there are no objections, the minutes from the March 19th meeting,
Objection.
yes?
My information, it just goes familiar with real estate contract, fairness district student and homeowner in this county. Sorry, page 3 of 25, March 19 meeting minutes.
Okay, under A1,
A1.
and what change would you like?
And as district student and homeowner in county.
Current district student and homeowner?
And homeowner in the county.
Any other additions or corrections? Seeing none. We'll adopt the minutes as corrected by Liz and by myself. Seeing none, so ordered. And we'll move on now to item A4, anticipated future meetings. April 23rd, May 7th, May 21st, and June 11th. I know we've discussed these before. Are they still satisfactory?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, very good. Now we get to public comment. The public will have different opportunities to address the committee. The public can address the committee during the public comment. And before an action or discussion item, the public can provide public comment in person through the Zoom app and by telephone. Public comment will last approximately 10 minutes. The time allotted to each speaker is 2 minutes. If you are attending the meeting in person, you need to submit a request to address the board form to indicate your desire to speak during public comment on a non-agenda item before the item begins on the agenda item. And just parenthetically, I'm feeling his complaint about the size of the point. If participating via Zoom, you will need to raise your hand by clicking on the appropriate icon in the Zoom app or by pressing *9, accessing the meeting by phone. No yielding of time or substitution of speaker is permitted. The public will have an opportunity to make public comments on agenda items after the presentation. For each discussion and action item, the time allotted for public comment on each action or discussion item and items not discussed on the agenda will be no more than 10 minutes and 2 minutes per speaker. Are there any hands raised?
Not at this time.
Any members of the public here wish to make a comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item D1, which is an overview of the Whaler Act. And Melissa Payne is the presenter. Turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. In this discussion item, we have this for 80 minutes. Did you mean for that to be 20 minutes per item or just a countdown of 80 minutes?
Let me ask, Ms. Payne, how many minutes do you need?
For the first item, it'll be brief, no more than 5 minutes for the presentation. D4 has been postponed. And so the intention of 80 minutes was for the entire section of discussion items.
Okay. Mr. Sheldon? Your best estimate of time you require?
I'm gonna guess from my side, it's maybe 15, 20 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
See, yeah, that's 7 o'clock, I know, but obviously that's subject to the feedback and questions that the committee would have.
Okay. So, and the balance of time will be reserved for item D3. Have a hopefully exchange among everyone here.
I have a question.
Art?
Yeah, I was wondering if, you could tell the committee how many, members are online.
At this time, we don't have any members online. We have, 2 people in the audience. We have, President Trustee Smith Folds, attending, and we have another community member representing the East Bay Parks.
So 2 people.
2 people attending online. That's correct.
Yes.
Brief question, why is the agenda listed in, non-alphabetical order, like skipping B, going from A to C? I've seen that a couple of times, when I'm writing the meeting minutes, that we miss letters in the order of the agenda. So I'm just wondering if there's a logic behind it, because we went from,
B was in the March 5 minutes. B was public comment and C was skipped.
right, so I'm just I'm just wondering if there's if it's simply a typo, that's okay. I wanna know if there's a pattern or something I'm missing, that's all.
So it was following our Board of Education meetings. Typically C is consent, D is discussion, E would be superintendent, and then F would be action. And so it kind of just carried over, but if it's the desire of the committee that it strictly follow the alphabetical order and not skip, we can do that in the future.
I don't have a preference, I just wanted to understand, because I noticed, again, only because I've had to write the minutes out, I've noticed that there are patterns, and the way I operate is I like to try to understand if there's a reasoning behind it, so I'm okay with it if the committee is as well.
What's on B is need to know, you don't even know.
I guess not this meeting,
Not
yeah, not today.
But how,
Me either.
We're off topic now, so let's move back to, item, D1, which is the overview of the Whaler Act. And, I believe that will apply to at least one of the properties, because we have a recreational use that is taking place on one of the parcels. And, that, I believe, triggers the Whaler Act.
So good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here before you today. Legal counsel is not present at tonight's meeting, and so this will be a very brief overview. At the earlier meeting, council did come and they talked a little bit about the Whaler Act. I wanted to start by just kind of doing the quick general overview. And so for the surplus property process, one of the major responsibilities of the 7-Eleven committee is to determine if they believe a property to be surplus. And then if they believe that property to be surplus, to make a recommendation on the highest and best use of the property. And that'll be in the report that will move forward to the board with the committee's recommendation. And so the board ultimately has the responsibility and the decision to declare a property surplus, and then to declare the intent of what to do with that property, whether it be to sell or lease or a number of different types of options. And so as part of that review, part of what the board would look at is the statutory process that sets forth kind of the sequence of events that would take place after that. And so the Naylor Act specifically is in Education Code 17485 at sequence, and it sets forth kind of a series of different requirements if an offer is required by the Naylor Act. And so some of the things that we talked about in the earlier meeting is the Naylor Act applies when all of the following conditions are present. And so the first condition is that all or a portion of the property is used for school playground, playing field, or other outdoor recreational purposes, and open space land particularly suited for recreational purposes. The second, the land has been used for such purposes for at least 8 years immediately preceding the board's decision to sell or lease the property. And lastly, that no other available publicly owned land in the vicinity is adequate to meet the existing and foreseeable needs of the community for playground, playing field, or other outdoor recreational and open space purposes as determined by the governing body of the agency which proposes to purchase or lease land from the district. So the Naylor Act does get pretty technical. You can tell I just read that because I didn't want to misspeak. It's not my area of expertise. But beyond that, there's a number of additional things with the Naylor Act. One of them being, as was mentioned by council, that in the event that the Naylor Act does apply to a site, the district, and some districts have sought waiver of the Naylor Act requirements from the California Department of Education, which is allowable under Ed Code 33050. And so what we recommend tonight, based on the agenda that's before the committee, is definitely that the committee conduct its business. And if there are very specific questions to the application of the Naylor Act, the specific statutes, that we gather those questions and that we invite council back to the meeting to address those specific questions for a specific site, so that we can bring the best information to the committee. But since at this time that hasn't happened yet, we didn't want to initiate council coming until we knew that there was that need or that request of council. And so I hope that very brief overview was helpful. And I'm happy to provide the statute again, if you guys want me to read that one more time. But it's a very prescribed process with a lot of turns. So I don't want to misstate, and so that concludes my presentation.
So why are we even discussing the Naylor Act, or I've been just like bringing it up in brief? If we're gonna have to bring it up again at a later meeting, like if council isn't here and we're really not gonna be able to explore this thoroughly, why was it even maintained on the agenda?
So I would say we did ask council to attend tonight's meeting. They're not able to be here tonight. The request was made of staff that this be on the agenda. And so in the absence of council being able to attend the evening tonight, we asked them for the pieces that I've shared with you, to try to bring that information forward.
If I may contribute, when we worked up the agenda, I believe I requested some explanation in the NEWRAC for the benefit of the newer members of the committee. Just with respect to one parcel in particular, Harmon Knolls has a recreational use on, say, parcel number 2 of the 2 parcels of Harmon Knolls. And that has gone on for some years. And so obviously there, some assessment, appraisal of the impact of the Nailer Act should be done when we consider what are the benefit and official uses of the parcel.
I'm not objecting to discussing the Nailer Act on, I think it is relevant to the properties, I think more than one property that we're discussing as part of this. But my bigger concern was, it doesn't seem like we'll be able to adequately discuss this without council. And so my question was, if council isn't here, we couldn't schedule them here. Maybe we should have pushed this agenda item to a different meeting when council was present. And I know that for me, because I'm returning to this and I'm going through this process again, I'm over it, right? But like, I understand your logic now, Jim, which was there are some of us who haven't been exposed to this before and needed to hear it. But again, I guess my concern is, it would have been nice to have council to discuss this so we don't have to kind of like hop around between subjects and kind of just get through each item. That was why I brought it up.
I think we expect council to be here at a future date to discuss the Nailer Act. I would want to make sure that they're prepared to answer the question on Harmon Knolls in particular, since 1/3 of the parkland right now is still owned by the city. Does that negate the issue of no other available space for recreational uses? I mean, if there's already a park next door, do we still have to maintain what is being used as a park right now? I would like to make sure they're prepared to answer that. Make sure they've seen the property, or at least they looked at it on aerial photographs. So I don't want to have them say, well, we'll have to get back to you on that. That makes sense?
Yeah, the expired MOU is somewhere available.
We would have to look for the document. I'm not saying that it's not available. We do have records. At this current time, though, we haven't searched in depth for that record.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can you clarify that the MOU is expired?
There is an MOU between the district
Yeah.
and the city of Richmond with respect to the use of the park at adjacent to Harmon Knolls. With the district retained title to the parcel, but the management of the parcel for recreational purposes was the responsibility of the city. The terms that I have never seen the MOU. I understand it expired in 2021. And so, beyond that, I'm at a loss. Don?
I'm gonna be going down to City Hall tomorrow to look for other information, pertaining to some of this stuff. I'll see if I can drop by their office and see if they've got a copy of it. It's just sitting right on the desk.
Oh.
I mean, well, yeah, no, I'm being facetious, of course, but I mean, hit it from both sides. Cause if there was an MOU, you know that both sides had a copy of it.
Right.
Like that.
I can tell you they're looking at it right now, but that would be good if you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to see the document, yeah.
Well, I know Lena is looking for it right now.
Okay.
Sam?
Is this MOU different from other joint use agreements, or is there one joint use agreement between the city of Richmond and the school district for recreational facilities?
So when you mentioned a 2021 date, I'm not quite sure if you're referring to the joint use agreement between the city and the district. Joint use agreement is really just about how we share properties amongst each other for use. It's not a land use agreement. Typically, we have a land use agreement that would extend to a particular parcel. That particular document is something that sounds like you have somebody in the city that's looking for it. this point in time, I haven't scoured our records here to see what we have, but it would be in an older document. Um, That would be on that parcel.
So, Arlo, what is the name of the park?
We just call it, Hilltop Park.
Hilltop Park.
Okay.
It's on Groom.
Oh, I know where it's at, so,
So you're saying, I'm sorry, just to clarify, Louis, you're saying that the MOU, that perhaps we're conflating the joint use agreement with the
Yes.
memorandum of understanding, the two separate documents, the land use agreement would only apply to the MOU, not to the JUA.
That would be correct.
Thank you.
Can I make a quick clarification? I want to ensure that the question for council is properly communicated. And so it's really helpful if you send it in writing so that I can make sure I capture the question. I would hate to ask them to be prepared and be the culprit of the grapevine game.
no, you didn't understand.
So, if there are specific questions that come up today, that we would like to send to council, it would just be really helpful for staff if we receive them in writing so that we could convey the question to the best of our ability, so that they can come to the meeting.
You want it sent to you?
You can send it to the chair, you can send it to me, your preference. Or the preference of the chair.
Okay, I just, Samantha, since you got that point of clarification, could you write the question, please? And send it to me, and then I'll forward it on.
What question specifically?
About the Naylor Act in
The
particular.
Neighbor Act and the distinction between the joint use.
Got it.
and-
I do have that. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So. Moving on. I think we've gone as far as we can with the Neighbor Act. So let's move on to item D2, which is the overview of the opinion of value of the four sites. And Mr. Sheldon is here from Terra Realty. And so in your packet are printouts of slides. And I believe they're in alphabetical order. So. Turn it over to you.
They are. So thank you very much again, by way of introduction, my name is Scott Sheldon with Terra Realty Advisors, and I'm working with the district for quite some time on these properties as well as other properties. But that's what we're here today, to continue the discussion that we started a few weeks ago with a big overview of the different, four different sites. And again, I know that you guys all have that information in your file because it was part of the meeting before last. So anyway, we'll start again in alphabetical order. You want to pull that up, Melissa?
Sorry, just 1 second. I was trying to help with the viewing.
So again, Adam, this, again, by way of refresher, this is in unincorporated Contra Costa County. It is not within the city limits of Richmond or any other city. It's in the county. And the map that you're looking at right now is the map in terms of the original information that we distributed to the committee that shows the entire outline in an aerial, Google aerial view. And so you can get a little bit of context and everything. I know that the last meeting, or I believe the last meeting, that the committee went to the site. And one of the things that was really important to understand about the site is not looking at it in 2 dimensions, but looking at it in 3 dimensions, because there's a lot of topography. And there are areas here that go up and down and all around. So in terms of the overall site, this is graphically representing what the overall site is. And I think it's a little over 8 acres, if I remember correctly. So again, the district acquired the property back in the 1950s, and there was a parcel map that I showed everybody from the original back in the 1900 something that showed the original subdivisions that were actually part of that. And when the district acquired that, all that stuff went away, and it became basically a parcel of land. And that was again what happened in the 1950s. There are conditions, covenants, and restrictions, or CCNRs, that encumber the property, as well as other properties in the area. And that includes things like building height restrictions and setbacks and things like that.
Could you go over those, please?
Well, there's a whole bunch of them in the CCNR, but the basic ones are, you can't have a saloon. That there are, you know, certain things that you, uses that you cannot have. There are deed restrictions, in there, some of which are no longer enforceable. And then again, land use type things. That's typically what's in CCNRs. And those we have copies of that, and I believe that's part of the title report information that we obtained on all the properties. So that is, there's other of the properties that we're talking about that have CCNRs on them also.
Question, Scott.
Yeah.
Do we have, as a committee, access to a drive or a file, a cloud folder of these documents to like reference?
I delivered them to the district. I'm not sure how that they're published, so that we've got.
Okay.
So I'll let that's a good question. But again, all of that information is available, and if you can't find it, let me know and I can it's all there.
So you sent it to staff already?
This was a while ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as part of this process. It was from last year.
So I apologize. I just said, okay, because I don't know where they are currently located, but I will either confirm that we have them or request them again and make them available to the committee. So my response should have been yes.
And what about the general public?
We'll make it public through this committee, which will make it available to the public.
Thank you.
Because some of us are out there in the community and we're frequently being asked questions, and giving a broad general answer is not always satisfactory. And so just like what Sam was saying, somebody may want us to actually read the damn thing.
Right, and all of that information, again, we gave you the synopsis the
Yeah.
last time, and then last year before, whenever that was. So there was a synopsis that we put together, but again, all of that documentation is there. And again, if you can't find it or whatever, it's no issues to get all that. And that would include all of the exhibits that we put together, not just the title report with copies of all the exceptions, but also the zoning maps and all the other things. So we get a lot of information that's there.
So just trying to confirm the logistics. Sounds like these might be large files,
They're gonna be, well, all this information, yes, they'll be large files.
so it may be difficult to email. So asking the committee if I could maybe post them to the 7-Eleven committee and then send an email out to the committee letting you know that they're posted to that website so that they would be available for view and download. I just fear if I try to email them, you might receive a lot of emails from me.
You'll have to do it. We typically do that in form of a link, because we create a file and all of that, and we can send that as a link, which is downloadable and they can be imported or however you want to do it, in terms of the district.
And sadly, those of us that use Macs, a lot of times when we attach something to an email, the size gets increased by 30 or 40%. So I mean, it's that close to being past the limit, then all of a sudden it's way past. So a link only takes up this much space.
There's enough information there, and the documents are significantly large, especially when you get into, very long documents, or there's color involved in terms of, zoning maps and things like that. So again, everything that we do, we have a service that we do that has a link that we just put all that stuff in there. It's uploaded. It's a cloud-based. You just click on it, boom, downloads everything. And I have a Mac too, so you don't have to worry about something getting goobered up in the process. Now, all you IBM people have another issue maybe. All right. So in terms of the other restrictions, there's building height restrictions, setbacks, and that has to do with the location next to the Hayward Fault. And if you remember, it's in an Alquist Priola zone. So there are special restrictions on that because of ground movement and earthquakes and things like that. So there's a whole different set of issues and different set of requirements that would have to happen in terms of being able to construct something on the site. So with all of that, again, we went through the analysis and then a couple years ago and then updated it. We assumed that out of the original property that you saw that shows the entire outline, that taking out the slopes, taking out areas that were basically not developable for whatever reason, primarily slopes, that there's approximately 6 acres of developable property. And that I know the county is in the process of rezoning all that. I know in my conversations with your local representative, John Joya, that they would like to do a higher density type housing on there. I'm not sure that's achievable with, and I told them that, with the requirements of Alquist Priola. So what we made the assumption on from a valuation perspective was a 6 unit per acre, which is basically a single family residential, very similar to a lot of areas in Richmond, in El Cerrito, and Pinole, et cetera. So again, we had to make assumptions on this, and that's the assumption that we made.
Scott,
So
do you recall off the top of your head what the height restrictions are? I mean, with that being on a hillside, the views are critically important, because property values for people behind. But, if you're down slope, you might get away with a 2-story or a 3-story without restoring the.
no, it has nothing to do with view. It has everything to do with the ground motion. So the higher building that you get, the more potential damage there could
Yes.
be. So it's really, you know, a geologist is gonna have to say, in this particular kind of construction, at this particular location, you can only go 35 feet. Yeah, period. Then there's another overlay on that. You're right, in the development world, where if you're blocking views, that's something different. But what I'm referencing in here has nothing to do with views. It has everything to do with the geological conditions that are
I
there.
understand that, but those hills are full of lawsuits.
Mhm.
You know, ask how long it took us to, the pause when we tried to rebuild El Cerrito High School because one neighbor
Mhm.
said he was blocking his view of Albany Hill. It's the backside of Albany Hill. Okay, it delayed it by several years. They had to redesign the whole school on that. You've had people in those hills where they want to cut down a tree. Well, they didn't block a view, except they blocked the view of the refinery. And now all of a sudden, the house behind it, the property value decreased substantially because now they're looking at a refinery.
Right.
And so, I mean, these are kinds of things that can affect a developer.
It will, but I think that the more significant impact to a developer is what kind of density can I get with this Alquist Priola ground issue in place? And that's gonna drive development more than anything else. I will also say, again, you've all seen the site. So if you're gonna build something, you're probably not gonna build anything really high anyway. And then you can't because of the seismic issues. So the other thing is that the ground is on a slope. So if you're up here, everything slopes down this way. Well, that's really good for the people up here because no matter what you're building, you know, you're probably gonna be well under them. And when you look at how that property benches at the top and then comes down, I think you're gonna be able to address that, but it's gonna be a combination of, you know, not blocking neighbors' views and what can we physically do with the ground condition the way that it is. Yes, sir.
So, I was wondering, when you spoke to Joya, or maybe you could speak to this, when we're talking about density, what are we talking minimum wise and maximum wise, for density on that property? Are we talking 30 per acre?
You can, in today's world, you can do a lot because jurisdictions are looking for more housing.
On that specific property?
But what I'm saying and suggesting that regardless of what it is that you want in terms of density, there's gonna be an issue with being able to achieve it because of the seismic issues. So from a valuation purpose, you know, what we made the assumption of, look, if we have to have certain setbacks, I mean, it's a 50-foot setback between houses. So, because they want, you know, and that's the 35 feet in some of those areas. So if a house falls over, they don't want to fall into the next person's property.
Yeah.
And again, in Alquist Priola is an entirely different set of regulations, geologically, that you have to go through in order to get a building permit.
So density wise, what's the number?
The number is whatever you can do geologically. I don't know the
Okay.
answer to that question. I mean, I can tell you that with a 6 unit per acre project, that you can probably make that work with the height restrictions and with the setback requirements. Again, you know, it depends on the type of construction that you're doing, how you're doing it, where you're doing it. and how high you're going, and can you get anybody to lend money on it? And can you get the building department to agree to, give a permit on it? Because you may have to do pilings down 250 feet to
Yeah.
tie into bedrock. I don't know what, I'm just
Yeah.
telling you what the various things, the developer would have to go through in order to achieve anything. Even a 6 unit to the acre project may be infeasible.
Yeah, but that's not really high density then,
It's not high density,
Right.
It's low density,
right?
yeah,
I have a question.
yes.
When, in the last sentence, there you're talking about comps in the area indicate a range of values of $23 to $33 per square foot. Is that bare ground?
Yes,
And so that would be post demolition. The demolition would fall onto the developer or onto the district.
it would, from a valuation point of view, somebody will look and say, I can pay this much money for the land. And I'll give you a really quick, the development world is really, really simple. A developer is gonna look at what they can build, in terms of number of units, whatever that is. And then, they're gonna say, okay, I can sell it for this much. It's gonna cost me this much in terms of hard construction cost, soft construction cost, loan fees, all of that stuff. And then I want a profit of, and whatever's left over is what they can pay for the land. That's how the development will work. It's really simple.
Okay.
In a complicated way, it's simple, because everybody's got different cost structure and everything else, but that's in essence what it is. So if you look at the very last page, line on the, on number 18, demo cost would be a deduct from the range of value. So this would be, here's what a developer could pay in this market for normal construction without being, and without having to tear everything down that's there.
Quick point of order, I just wanted to share with the chair, that member, Guadalupe Enyana has joined via Zoom.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, in terms of, to make it real clear, the 6 acres of usable land, what we did was we ran comps, we ran, what we felt the development community would be able to pay for a finished product, backed it out, looked at what the comps were to verify that, and we felt that that would be somewhere in the $23 to $33 square foot range. We always like to give ranges, this is fluid, and everybody looks at things a little bit differently. But it does not include the cost of taking out the buildings.
No.
I worry about, that's a relatively low price for the size of that property to begin with. And you start deducting for removing the building where that has lead-based paint, has asbestos on there. It's almost like we almost have to pay somebody to take the property off our hands.
That would not be, that could very well be the case. Again, it's, there's so many issues with this site, and it's a beautiful site, but there's a lot of issues with it. And it's not the same when the houses that are there now were built in the, the 30s. And who cares about it at the point? So, the building standards were completely different at the time. And, everything was different. Now we have stupid prices, but there's a lot of rules to get there. And, the rules is that whatever the building department signs off on, they have to make sure it's safe and habitable. And so therefore, there are gonna be a lot of restrictions that go on that. So I'm not gonna disagree with what you're saying. And, I can also tell you, we're doing some demo also. And you're probably on a prevailing wage job, you're probably looking at about $7.50 a square foot. Could be as high as 10, but that does not include the environmental side. So if there is lead-based paint, if there's asbestos, that's the Ghostbuster side of it, and I have no idea. We're getting ready, in fact, we've got a project we're doing in Torrance, and my group is down there today, and they're doing an assessment. What's the cost to demo this thing? Because the demo, tearing stuff down is really simple. It's the other stuff that's not as simple. So if you look at that, you're absolutely right. The assessment, Don, you said it, and a couple other people, is that, the value of this piece of property is really, really nice if there was nothing wrong with it. And I don't mean wrong, but there's no impact on it, and there's a lot of impact. And that may drive, it could drive the decision of, how you form a recommendation, what do you want to do? Because, You know, I could also say, that, well, maybe we just use that as open space parkland. We looked at doing solar farm. Is that a potential option to do? You know, there's different things that the committee will need to look at in terms of forming what their opinion is and recommendation is to the board.
The other thing I would share, just as a building characteristic, I know the committee had the chance to take a site walk on the property. But when you enter that property, you enter on the second floor. Third, thank you. So the building that is there, you can't simply just demolish without addressing the support that it's providing to the road. And so it isn't necessarily a clean demo either. There would be a lot of considerations that would need to be made in doing that demolition safely.
I was assuming that if we did that, we could end up with a church and that would actually increase the value. But,
One thing I'm concerned about, because we've dealt with this before, just wonder if there's any, buried fuel tanks.
I don't know. I don't know if that assessment's been done. We looked, you know, in GeoTracker, there was nothing there. But
Yeah.
again, in order to really do that, if you're gonna go through that process, you would wanna go through and get an extensive, environmental assessment. And again, but we did look at GeoTracker to see if there was anything there, but we didn't find anything. And what Melissa brought up is a really, really good point. Taking the building out, that's just taking the building out, but you'd have to stabilize that entire wet easterly, you know, section right there, because it is, that is, now it's already got some, because there's CMU wall there, but it's all held together with a building. So you take the building out, and now you gotta figure out, how does this thing not, you know, the wall that's there now that's holding it back not fall over? So again, there's a bunch of different things in terms of, you know, what do I do and how do I do it? And I think that's one of the reasons why the building hasn't been demolished. I mean, you know, Portola was demolished, the Seaview was demolished, but this one, it's not just taking out the sticks and stuff, it's like, what's gonna hold up the rest of the hill?
When the district demolished the old Gompers High School, which actually used to be the Richmond City Hall, many decades ago. They found an underground storage tank there that didn't show up on any
I
drawings or maps, and it cost millions of dollars and delayed by a very long time, any kind of work.
I found that before
Yeah.
also, and just because somebody just bootlegged it in, that's why, they didn't go get permission to do it. So, and again, you know, 80, 90 years ago, that could have happened. There's nothing in the public record that we found, but again, there's a more extensive test that would need to be done on that.
And to the earlier point, when Harmon Knolls was taken down, I was there and I actually called OSHA and EPA because they took it down without addressing the asbestos. And it was friable. It was blowing everywhere. And so I took the liberty of calling OSHA and the district was fine, from my recollection. And so I'm confident that Adams would have some type of issues regarding.
I'm sure there is, but
Yeah.
again, that's gonna take a very
And
detailed
that-
analysis
Yeah.
of what it is, and then it's, you know, and it depends on the quantity, and again, all of that stuff depends on, you know, how much of it is there, and you know, what part of it can you take to the dump, because the big cost is taking it to a class 1 dump, you know, where you have to containerize, and then you send it down to Kettleman City and you own it for the rest of your life.
Right.
So that's a quantity thing, and there's a lot of things that go into that. And so, again, when I say $7.50 a square foot, that's just to tear the thing down, haul it away, assuming that there's nothing wrong.
Melissa Heston, you talked to me before about the pancaking of the building. When the building was evaluated by a structural engineer, were any of these issues touched?
So I would have to go back and look, and I would wanna confer with Louis, to see if we have any reports on file that would represent that information, and then we could also make that available.
Yeah, having been on staff there, the conversation that I recall is everyone said it was on rollers. And then in an earthquake would just go back and forth. We might lose the ramp to the 3rd floor, but the classroom structure would somehow ride out the shaking. I never saw a document
Yeah, I
Well, it's
haven't
simply
personally
a-
reviewed one
simply a-
either.
There is one, we have one in our files, because we didn't request all that, and, again, it was done by Alan Kopelman. And, that is in the file, we have it in our files too, and that would be, we would produce all of that, that's some of our due diligence work, because again, and we had the same information on Portal. In terms of but that's a landslide thing, that's
Right.
different than the, output. than
Like
the-
landslide.
So that information is available.
Question?
Yeah.
So, aside from housing, and you had mentioned the solar farm potentially, what are some other potential uses that haven't already been discussed that have, given all these restrictions and these challenges with the site, what are other options?
When you're asking my opinion, I'll give you my opinion. And we have talked a lot about this and thought about it, about recreational type uses. So, there's areas that you could create. Maybe, maybe you do a whole bunch of tennis courts, and I'm just throwing that out. Pickleball now.
Sensitive subject.
But again, that's, that is a use, so recreational uses. We talked to East Bay Regional, and they're on the line about this, and again, this is going back a couple of years ago in terms of park. But, again, the values aren't really there on this stuff, so, but again, you have to evaluate what is the right thing to do with the property in terms of, what can you do with it? And what's in the best interest of not only the district, but the community too, that's part of your charge.
Regardless, the hazardous materials would have to be removed.
If yeah, because you can't use the building. Correct.
Well,
Or
sorry,
exchange the property,
The what?
or exchange the property that you mentioned before at one time.
Well, you can exchange it, but you have to find somebody that actually wants the property in order to exchange it. So what we're talking about right now is what is the potential value of that out in the marketplace? And then what are some of the uses? We also looked at self-storage, mini storage. And we ran it past a couple people and they weren't wild about the concept, but again, you don't have the same residential use. And again, in a fault zone area, the local agencies are primarily concerned with what's gonna happen with people that are living there. And in something like that, nobody's living there. So again, that's another potential use. Again, I don't know how viable it is. We didn't get real good feedback on that in terms of, yeah, let's go do it. But maybe on a portion of it, I don't know.
you have a number of people, current and past board members, as well as members of UTR that are looking at very heavily for workforce housing.
Mhm.
And also the county fire department is looking to reuse the building for training purposes as a joint regional training facility. So that would not require them to tear it down necessarily. But there are, I mean, just adding to the list that you.
Exactly, there's all kinds of, like I said, we talked to these big regional parks, we talked to, what we were trying to do is come up with ideas that the district or a future person can use the property for. And again, what we're trying to relate it back to is what's the value of that? And again, because that's a baseline, and you can ignore it or you cannot ignore it, but it's important to understand it,
Has there been a professional appraisal done on the property?
not to my knowledge. Yes, there was, and it was in 2009,
When Beller wanted to.
Okay, so that's outdated.
2008, it's stale dated.
Yeah, very. Can we get another one? Can we get a current appraisal?
You could, the problem is that you have to tell somebody what the use is. Because otherwise it's gonna be, and this is the issue, it's not, say, like Seaview, okay, that's residential and
Mhm.
gonna be residential, that's easy to appraise.
Right.
But a property like Adams is harder to appraise because what do I use it for? Because again, I'm telling you basically what an appraiser is gonna tell you. And it's just, tell me what you're gonna use it for, or I'll make an assumption of what it is. And say, all right, you can do this, but then I'm gonna start whittling away at it. And that's what you're gonna get. I don't think that an appraisal would be of a lot of value unless somebody came in and said, I want to do this with the property.
Have you guys checked into a surveyor within the area? A surveyor within the area to say like, okay, this community needs X. you know, they're,
When you say surveyor, I'm thinking of a civil engineer.
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, not that type of surveyor, but the other ones that do the data assessments for everything in the area that's within the community to say, kind of like when they put a new grocery store in a location.
Right.
A demographer.
Well, no, it's more of a
Land
marketing
use
survey.
economics.
You know what, but again, you know, when you look at it, that's why we wanted to test the commercial side of it, because it wouldn't have the same impact as residential would, but really it's zoned residential. And it's, the county wants to keep it. In fact, they want to change the zoning to residence. Right now it's public service, PPP. But they want to change that because their idea is that they want workforce housing, they want more housing, and that's great. The issue is, how do you accomplish that on a site that has the impacts that they have? And really, you can't evaluate that until somebody comes to the district and says, I want to build this on the site. And they do the studies and say whether that's feasible or not feasible, and then what they can pay for it. So what I'm giving you is sort of the top line, you know, here's what it could be worth if you can do this. But so from the market perspective, you could have somebody go out and say housing. Okay, well, yeah. So what does that mean? Doesn't tell you what the worth of it is. So the worth in this particular instance, and this is really an interesting exercise, and we've been looking at this thing for 15 years, is what can you do with it that's going to be beneficial for the district and the community? That you can actually do.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's hard to defy the laws of gravity. And this is a law of gravity that, you know, is, you can defy it, but how much money is it going to take? But, you know, in terms of another public use, and we're doing 2 fire stations right now. And, you know, those are great. Now, most of them would want to tear it down, but if it was for a training facility, that may be, but then they're gonna have to look at, what do I have to do to make this functional? Because they got the same issues that everybody else does, school district, you know, I gotta be in a safe environment. And it's really hard to understand what the cost of achieving that is until you actually have, I want to do this. Now, I could say, you know, from recreational use, even on an interim basis, there's areas of that are flat that would be easy to turn into a soccer field or a pickleball court, because I'm doing that because Don wins. And, you know, but you know what I'm saying? It's, you know, from a recreational perspective, maybe that's something that's worthwhile. And that's why we had actually reached out to the park district on that, and there was not a lot of interest at the time because they didn't have any money. So.
Okay.
So just to be clear, that if any sort of usability, feasibility analysis gets done, it must be by the developer proposing a specific use, and it'll be on their dime to do these assessments and to get to that conclusion, right? So the district, despite owning the property, has no responsibility on proposed uses unless there is already someone interested in and bringing money and bringing an idea to this, right?
So here's how you would test that. You would go out on an RP, which is a request for proposal, and say, we've got this property. Here's what it's zoned. Tell us what you'll pay for it. That's better than an appraisal, because then you have people that are going and saying, here's what it's actually worth to us. And again, you know, there's a lot of different potential uses. I mean, could a church go in there? Maybe. And they say, well, look at, you know, we're gonna, you know, we've got the forces that we can go in and do all this stuff with our members, and it's not gonna cost us the same amount of money as a developer coming in and saying, I wanna tear it all down and do all that. Again, there's just, it's wide open, and it's wide open because of the constraints.
Okay, I hate to cut it off, but I think we've got some other sites to go through. We're running a little long on time.
Yeah, no, I'm already blown through my 20 minutes, Melissa, sorry.
So if we can move on to Harmon Knolls.
Okay. All right, so Harmon Knolls, so this is the aerial photo that we showed, in the outline of the entire piece is as the single property. We divided it, and we divided it based on the basically the park area right there, and I believe that I do have the MOU too. Cause I did talk to the city of Richmond about this. And, so if, I'll look in my thing also, but I'm 85% sure I've got it. 'Cause I
Can I
know
ask
we
you who
talked
you
about
spoke
it.
to? Can I ask you who you spoke to?
Yes, I spoke to the park and rec person and I spoke to the city manager who is no longer the city manager.
Okay.
2 years ago.
Thank you.
So how we looked at this property, I wanted to separate the two of them because there was an agreement, it expired. With Richmond and, the parcel off to the left that's not outlined, that is the 2 acres and the city of Richmond does own that property. But there was an agreement, adding the 3.8 acres roughly, to that, and that would be part of the park area right there. And then, but everything that's circled, even though I've divided it, is all one parcel. So, and then there's a 5-acre parcel that sits off to the right, to the north side of the property. And, that part is really the part that we looked at, is we felt that there was enough issues with the 3 acres that we didn't want, that kind of takes a separate track on that. And again, that's gonna be up to the committee to make a recommendation. And then the board to, what do they want to do? And then the politics with the city of Richmond. So that's so how we framed this for just this property, was looking at just basically the 5 acres. Okay, you could apply the same methodology, the same per square foot and everything else to the other, but we felt it was important to keep those 2 separate. So again, the district, this is a summary that we went through before, when the district acquired the property. Again, there's CC&Rs that are on there that limit the land uses to residential or business use if it's designated in the city zoning to allow it. There are setback requirements on portions of the property that's typically in the zoning code. And there is a provision for multifamily housing on the school is not used for school purposes, but that's an allowable use. And if you remember also that the property slopes down to the park, not the parkway. I can't remember the road.
Robert Miller Drive.
Thank you, Robert Miller Drive. So there's no right of access off of Robert Miller Drive to access the property. You have to go up through the other streets right there. Okay, so what we did in terms of coming up with an opinion of value was, there's 5 acres of the site. That it would support a townhome style development, which is 18 units of the acre, between 18 and 20, we used 18. Which would give approximately 90 new townhomes. And based on the square footages, on sales prices of other units in the area, a range of values of between $33 and $37 a square foot, or $7 to $8 million for the land. And that's only for the 5 acres. That is not the 3.8 acres. So again, that's our highest and best analysis on it. And the site is very developable. It's sloped, but it's not sloped like Portland and, or Adams. So it's a very developable site, good area, and in our opinion, would support a nice development.
Would you guesstimate that the 3 acres that is park right now would be about the same $33 to $37 per
Yes,
square
you
foot?
you could make that same application to that, and that's why I wanted to reference that, all right, if there's another 3.5 acres, you're still in the $33 to $37 a square foot is the value of that.
I would just add for the committee's consideration that of the 4 properties that are being evaluated, Harmon Knolls is the one property that could be used as the site to build a future school. And was referenced in the 2016 facilities master plan, was actually part of that plan. It was the demolition of the structure and then testing of the soils on the site to confirm that it was suitable land for school construction. And so that is one of the considerations for this property that we don't have for the other 3, because for the other 3, we understand that we wouldn't be able to build a school site on those properties. However, that's not the case for Harmon Knolls. So I just think it's really important to uplift that to the committee.
Thank you. Yes, and I remember that also.
And let's say for some crazy reason, the city does not renew its lease for the park property, would that be incorporated into the sale, or would that be something to be looked at later?
That would be up to, but you know, what the committee recommendation would be and what the board would want to do, in terms of the park area. I mean, that, you know, and I know in my discussions with the city people, and this is going back about 2+ years, you know, that they obviously wanted to continue, you know, using that as park. It meets, so cities in the general plan, and I talked about this before, they typically have a park ratio per population.
Right.
And so if you start taking parks away and you have that population, well, now I gotta replace that somewhere, otherwise I'm not in compliance with my general plan.
And there is no place to replace it. It is the only park in that neighborhood.
There's always a place to replace. Yeah, but you know, where and how much and everything else. So again, that was a discussion that was brought up. I didn't go any farther. I already know that. So that's one of the reasons why I carved it out. So it wouldn't, you know, for the committee's purpose, it's easier to add it in than to take it out. So that's why I did it that way. I separated it out and said, let's for purposes of this exercise, say that this is not part of our valuation. However, if it were, the same number to apply.
What you just described as the city's need for a certain amount of square footage for parks in a neighborhood, that's the city's problem, not the school district's problem.
Understand.
Yeah.
Also understand that they're all elected and the school board's elected too.
Yeah.
So one question I did ask, is that, so would the 5 acres be sufficient for an elementary school? That should be more than
Would it be
sufficient.
sufficient for an elementary
Yeah,
school?
in the event that it does transfer into us keeping it for an elementary
We've
school.
done elementary schools on 5 acres. It's a function of going through California Department of Ed, and it's an urban area, and typically we're down to 4.6 acres on an elementary school right
Okay.
now. So, it depends on the size and number of classrooms, and the open space requirement is, predicated on the number of students.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so let's move on to Portola. So again, there's, I'm assuming everybody's seen the site, that it's a fairly significant slope that drops from the Navalier, I think is across the top, as it goes down. And the district owns the property, that's I think the charter school, right?
Yeah.
That's on the, and they benched that, and then so it goes up from there. I know I showed photos, at the last presentation that we did, in terms of that. So, so that, but, and again, this site has, it was acquired in the 40s, built in the 50s, and torn down in 2012. But there's no real title issues that impact the site, from the title report. But there are fairly significant landslide issues, that have been occurring on Seaview, I believe, is the street that tees up. And they've had some sliding issues up there, probably related to, you know, the Hayward Fault that's farther up. I mean, that's a long ways away. This is not in an Annapolis pre-oil zone. But it is close to the Hayward Fault. So again, those things, geologic issues like that are fairly significant in terms of, you know, what they can do. So, you know, there's a lot of things that can be done with this site. Again, you know, in order to do something with it, you're gonna have to do something to the site that stabilizes the soil. I believe that there's ways to do that. And this site, because of the views, because of the location, you know, we came up with you know, this would be a really, really good, again, higher density, 15 unit to the acre townhome type development. It could be attached, because you got the buttress. So it'd be, if you think about the Adams site, you know, the school is kind of pinning that hill. So you do the same thing here. You would create a wall and hold back everything on that. And then you'd build down below that. So again, and I'm making a simplistic thing on that, but I think the Adams site is a really good, you know, way of doing that. Or you see, if you drive along the Highway 80, where Caltrans went in and they created, you know, the walls right there. And you just have to soil nail back into it and hold it. And so, but a site like this, because of the value, because of the views, you know, I think you could create real value there. So with that, we went and we valued the property in the $75 to $90 a square foot range, because of the ultimate sales prices of what you can get. You stand up there and I go, oh my God, here's my house. You know, I'm looking right at the Golden Gate Bridge, I'm looking at everything laid at my feet. So that imputes that. So again, that's $17 to $20 million of land value. And again, we would assume that, you know, again, if somebody were to come in and develop that site, they would do obviously real extensive geological testing and what do I need to do in order to retain this? And again, you can retain it, it's always a function of money.
So if Arlington Boulevard itself was largely created because it follows Hayward Fault.
Right.
I mean, it was naturally created by the Hayward Fault. But the landslide issue extends all the way up to Arlington.
Right.
I mean, that's just quite a ways up there. If you take a look at Mosier Lane, you've got vast open spaces on either side. You say, this is prime real estate,
Except for,
except that it's sliding down the hill. And I said, I date back to when I was a teenager, when the parts of Mosier would just collapse and slide down the hill. As a teenager, that's fun to look at.
Yeah.
It's help for the city and help for the cars.
but if you're looking at the Portola site and, you're going up Mosier right there, you know, the city's got a park right there. And they did exactly what I'm talking about. They dug in and then planted it, and then they created the park. They were able to bench that area out and create a level place. So again, it can be done. It's just a function of money. I don't know what that money is, but I know it can be done. And again, from a housing perspective, that is just a really terrific housing site. Yes.
So just out of curiosity, when you look at that property, it's so much, more expensive than the rest of the properties. Are you using the surrounding areas and the values of the homes, the surrounding homes and income, to get to those values?
We use both. We take a look and see what other land sales have happened, in the area. Not a lot, but there have been some. And then what are the housing prices, not only in the area, but what can you achieve for? Because if you're building something, so I'm doing a project right now in Los Gatos, and it's a 4-acre school site. And we've got, houses that are $2 million, and they're built in the 60s. And the developer, we're in escrow on it, and the developer is gonna start at $4 million. So you can look at that, but then you have to look at, okay, what am I achieving here that is different than everywhere else, and can it be supported? So that's how we look at it. And that's how a developer is gonna look at it.
Sorry. From Adams School and Portola, they're not too far apart from each other.
No, there are ways.
Yeah, a couple miles.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they're still up in the hill and beautiful views for
Yeah.
both locations.
for sure.
You have better views at Portola.
Right.
You don't have the same views. You have some views, but they're more filtered, at Adams.
Yeah, and the Portola is next to the electricity and all that.
Yeah, it's
stuff,
got
so.
that great little thing over there, but, the PG&E substation, yes. But you can fix that. It's called trees.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the half price in value. I'm like, okay, well, this is still a great area. But it's all with the soil and the land and
It's,
stuff
well,
they use.
Adams is really devalued because of it's up, down, all
Yeah.
over the place, and it's basically on the fault.
Okay,
So again, we're trying to look at, and again, from a developer's perspective, because it's,
Oh,
again,
easy.
that's how an appraiser is gonna look at it too. So
You can drive pilings at Portola to stabilize the ground. You can't drive
you can't
pilings.
drive
at
pilings,
Adams.
well, you can, but it's different. You're basically building, on bay mud on, Portola. So you look at San Francisco, the whole Embarcadero, that's all reclaimed ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did that, they built it and it's crappy soil, but they filled it up and they got all these different things going on that do that. Building on a fault is an entirely different issue. And it's easier to regulate slide than it is, seismic events when's that gonna happen? That make sense?
and New York had a big one, right?
They did. Everybody's getting one. Okay, so then last but not least is Seaview, because we're doing this in alphabetical order. So again, there's 2 parcels for the Seaview property. There's where the school was, that's the 4.6 acre property. And that's on the right-hand side. And then there's crossing over, that's Garrity Creek, and that's, basically local drainage that's going into the city, storm drain, coming from all over. And there's a way to access that site from the district side, and there's a little footbridge that goes across there. And then if you'll remember, there is a road that goes there off of San Pablo, but you go through a one-lane trestle, you know, with a railroad going over the top, or railroad tracks going over the top of it. So it's one lane and so it's very, not really super accessible. So in our opinion, and it's also in the floodplain, it's in the sea level rise area, and all that stuff was what we gave you at the last time, at the last meeting.
And the railroad,
Pardon?
and the railroad tracks.
And the railroad and the oil and high pressure gas lines, and there's two of them. They basically form the two parts of the frame of the picture.
Mhm.
So, you know, again, so we've got, you know, those different things happening. The other thing that's important, and when we did the initial stuff on this 15 years ago, you know, the district acquired the property, they built the school, and all of that, and then the buildings were demolished in 15. But one of the things that was recorded on the entire subdivision, and this is just I'll say the school portion, not the field portion. The field portion, not part of the original development. There was a restriction for single-family homes only, 6,000 square feet or more. And there was a map that we shared that was done at the original, when the original parcel maps and tentative maps and final maps were done. The district required that they merged them all, but in the CCNRs, those still apply. And so if somebody were to do something more than that, you'd probably have to get at least 51% of the homeowners to sign off on it, condemn it, or take your chances.
Question, 6,000 square feet refers to the land and not to the structure.
Correct.
You're saying,
Lot sizes.
sorry, I was gonna ask a question about that as well. You're saying that's a minimum? You said 6,000 or more?
Well, you can do more, you just can't do less.
Because I mean, the standard lot size in Richmond itself is 6,000.
Right.
It's not very big, and there's a lot of, in my neighborhood, a lot that are smaller than that.
But this is a minimum of 6,000.
Yeah, but 6,000 is getting just a little bit big for the
That's
area.
what they mapped it out, and that is what is in the CCNR. So that was done back in the 70s when they put the maps together, and that's what's recorded against all of those properties.
That's good. Yeah. Check some of the neighboring houses and see how big those lots are. I'll go to Zillow and they got it. I'm just curious.
Probably about 6,000 feet. I mean, we haven't done the math on them because it's, they're odd shaped. I mean, you can see how they go circles and stuff like that. So, but again, that's what it is, and that's what they did, and that's what was recorded, and there you have it. So that there, I know there, and there's one way in and one way out. So from a, you know, we'd like to do a really high density, big project there. Yeah, it's flat land. You can do that. I think that you're gonna run into a lot of legal problems with that. And community problems, because then there's more traffic and all the other things. So the original map, and again, this is the information that we shared, showed that in that area right there, there were 21 lots that were consolidated into one parcel. So when we looked at it, that's how we valued it, based on a 21 unit subdivision. There you go. Now, we did not assume any value for the field, because again, the access is very, very difficult, and it's basically recreational property. Now also back up and say, because I know East Bay Regional is on this call, we were approached, and then they also reached out that they would like to continue and put their East Bay Regional Trail through a portion of the property. It would follow along the railroad tracks and then come in and cross over and then keep on going south.
I wanted to comment that, about a year ago, I received an email from, I think it was the Richmond Bicycle BPAC, they call the BPAC, that, there was an intention or agreement already for the district to allow, to build the Bay Trail through there. So this was already announced like a year ago.
To my knowledge, there's been no agreement, because I know we talked about this 2 years ago.
I did forward that email to the committee. We were already inactive, but I did forward it to the committee last year.
Mhm.
When I got that email, like, whoa, what's going on here? Because we as a committee haven't met in a while, but apparently there was some sort of allowed use of this site for the Bay Trail to get built through, and it seemed really odd to me that, I mean, obviously, we don't have any say in how they, and I personally, I agree with, that use. But there were decisions being made, you know, independent of this committee. And I forwarded to the group, but I didn't hear back from anybody, and then that's when, you know, eventually we rebuilt and came back. But the intention was to bring it up in discussion at a meeting, because, okay, well, if the board is already making decisions that will allow the property to have recreational access because of the bike trail, that's already influencing our ability to make decisions on use for that land.
Or, and certainly value, yes, correct. So, but I'm surprised, I have not heard anything about that, and, we did get, an email from the East Bay Regional asking that they still wanted it to be considered, so we probably need to get to the bottom of what's really going on there, because that's new information to me, and it contradicts what, at least I don't know from the East Bay Regional.
So just as a reminder, actually, Don, I did send it to you too. This was an email I received from Bruce Bayard from the track, the Richmond Bay Trail Network. And it was, June 7, 2023. East Bay Regional Park District is progressing with engineering and environmental studies for closure of the 0.9 mile gap in the San Francisco Bay Trail spine between Point Pinole Regional Shoreline Park in Richmond and Wilson Point in Pinole. The project will provide first-time public access to part of the shoreline. It is anticipated that the preliminary design and CEQA document will be released for the public review in late 2023 or early 2024. I don't know if that's happened or not. The Park District staff is conducting a survey now to learn how people will use the trail in the future, and will be holding a public meeting in August. And it has a link about the project and the survey. So I can resend this to the group. But I just want to highlight that, this has been on this was on our radar for a while, so. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's new information, because again, it's kind of, you know, again, there's planning process and there's executing process, so, we can get to the bottom. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us who your contact is, for East Bay Regional Park?
It used to be a person and now there's a new person. I can't remember her name. I knew you were gonna ask that question.
Yeah. Is it Norm LaForce before, or
I'm sorry?
Norm? Was it?
No, it was a lady. I want to say Rachel.
And the
So-
last time you spoke to them was?
So point of order, we have a representative from East Bay Parks who's attending the meeting via Zoom, and they have raised their hand, so.
What is the name?
I think we're permitted to have a comment while we're on this topic, so, yes.
Okay, terrific. And so I am clicking now. Please unmute yourself.
Sarah Wright.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. I'm Sarah Reek. I'm the acting senior real property specialist with the East Bay Regional Park District. My boss, real property manager Rachel Lem, was previously assigned to this project. She is out on maternity leave and in fact just had her baby on Sunday. I am getting up to speed with this project. I spoke with Suzanne Wilson, who's in our Trails Development Department today. And I felt pretty confident that I was up to speed on everything, but I have to say that this news about this agreement is news to me as well. So I would like to take some time to discuss with our Trails Development Department what you guys have brought up with this letter from Bruce Bayard, and just do some research on our end. And then at the next committee, I'm happy to report out what I find. I do know that there's been some preliminary design for the trail across these Seaview portions. I wonder if perhaps that communication from Bruce was in relation to property that's just, I think that would be southwest of the Seaview property. That's just a thought that I'm having. But all I can say at this point is that I'm not 100% certain, but I'm happy to do some research and come back to the group with more information and more certainty.
Thank you.
Our next meeting is the 23rd of April. Is it possible to have an answer by then?
Certainly. Shall I continue to communicate with Lewis or Sheldon?
Both of us.
Okay, I'm sorry, is it Luis?
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
Pardon me.
So I
Siri,
would-
thinks I'm talking to her.
Yeah, you can send, email to, Louis Freeze at
Yeah.
WCUSD. And also to, Jay Sanders, 467@mac.com.
Okay,
I will be talking to Bruce tomorrow about this.
Okay.
He and I talked about it before, but I didn't remember all the details.
okay, well, thanks for the introduction and I'll get that information off to those committee members as soon as I can, and then I will plan to be attending the 23rd meeting as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Let's see, so moving back to the agenda.
So wait, I'm sorry, just as a wrap up, is there any other questions? I'm glad that they were able to be on, because that was, I mean, we've been talking about this very recently, so that was kind of a what?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm surprised we haven't even, again, to me, it's very clear that the NAILR Act could apply, I'm not saying that it could apply to this site. And so especially with the Bay Trail plans or whatever is happening, right? I think that we need to be cognizant of that, that's a possibility. And so not only that, but there is an actual county recreational facility butting up against this parcel.
Mhm.
Parcel 1, there's an active baseball field with lighting, which is like, I mean, shoot, parks with lighting right now are like, you know, they're so rare.
Desired.
They're so highly desired. There's a community center there. So, I mean, it needs to be on our radar that this is being used as recreation. I've gone on walks there to check out the creek and stuff. There's families out there on bicycles. People skating when when it's not all overgrown with weeds and stuff, but it's being used by the community. And there's beach access. It's not pretty, but I've seen people go down there, so.
Yeah, again, you're talking about the parcel, not the original school parcel, but the parcel off to the left.
No, I'm talking about this school parcel.
Okay.
Yeah, because people are able to walk to
Oh,
there.
yeah, they can
Yeah,
walk, well, there's
people can walk
fencing out there, but it's easy to get through.
Yeah,
So,
so it is being used by the community. I'm sure the community would like something else, but it is being used adjacent to the recreational use, so.
right. So just one last thing, just in terms of the NAILR Act. So the NAILR Act applies to school districts if they sell their property only. If you exchange it, it does not apply. So I just want, and again, what we always try to advise our school district clients is don't ever get rid of your assets. They use them in some way, shape or form. So anyway, just with that,
Okay.
thank you. I just wanted to circle back on.
That's fine. We went over time a little bit, but, next item on the agenda is D3, which is a discussion of priority uses for the 4 sites. And the reason for that is that if we get to holding public hearings, we have to present possible uses for the site to the public and get their input as to what will be acceptable to the surrounding communities. So, and this is rather unstructured in my mind because I didn't put a lot of thought into it, and I apologize for that. I've been around and looked at things. I guess part of what's in the back of my mind is when I looked at the projected capacity for the different sites in the district, El Cerrito stood out as a place where there is a sore need for additional elementary educational facilities. It goes from 101% to 141% of capacity, looking at the existing elementary schools, with the exception of Kensington. And Kensington, I know, is understated, having
my own children go there. I know that Kensington has or can have a number of transfer students come in and increase its enrollment considerably. So I don't know that the projected capacity 6 years hence at 86% is a fair representation of that school or its history. Nevertheless, when we started looking at Portola, for instance, we've talked about selling a site and it's not buildable, but is there another site in El Cerrito or in that area where additional educational facilities could be established?
Balboa.
So is that something that the 7-Eleven should be considering?
I think you're considering really
Well,
the Portland site tonight, so that discussion.
The Portola site is surplus by virtue of its unbuildable
Yes.
nature. But with respect to surplus sites, right now, the site below Portola is being occupied by Invictus Academy of Richmond, which is a charter school through the county, which opens up yet another issue that I discovered when I started looking at enrollment. The county has chartered at least four schools in our area
Mhm.
that account for nearly 3,000 students.
Mhm.
So when we look at the population of students that we're serving, there's been a decrease in enrollment in the district, but not necessarily a decrease in the student population for the district. Those are different things. And should there be a change in mood or belief about the nature of the schools in the district, it would lobby for more space for the students or preserving what space they have. When I looked at schools and distributed the work I did, and you guys will have a couple of spreadsheets to look at over the next meeting. But I looked at the schools that were in the vicinity of the surplus sites. And Pinole Valley High School had an increase in enrollment, and Michelle Obama had an increase in enrollment. And those were possibly due to enhanced programs and the fact that they're rebuilt schools. So when we start looking, for instance, at Harmon Knolls, maybe the thing to do with Harmon Knolls is to preserve it and think about an elementary school there. Relieve Highland, which is in need of reconstruction, if not replacement. So those are the things that were just floating around in my mind. And as I say, this is unstructured. So I'd like to hear other people's thoughts about the use of competing uses of CU, Portola, Harmon Knolls, and Adams.
Chair, can I propose that we go maybe site by site?
Sure.
Maybe, yeah, that just so that we can get organized in how we direct our comments.
So let's start out alphabetically. Adams first. Anyone?
So what's the question?
Question is, what possible uses be set up or you think could be considered for the Adams site to be presented to the community when we hold a community meeting?
I would say everything that he had listed earlier previously, from residential to parkland to storage facilities, fire academies.
That's storage facility. Having driven Arlington, it's hard to think of truck traffic on Arlington to go to the storage facility.
I'm thinking more like a mini storage, where you don't drive trucks up there, just maybe a pickup truck there.
I think that'd be awful for the neighborhood.
It would,
I think that a storage facility in that neighborhood would not be,
Yeah,
but he's just asking for
pushback.
oh,
To
yeah.
be fair, I don't think very many things will the community want there. I mean, I'm just being honest. It's like from conversations I've had with community members about that site, people want housing, but they don't want housing because they want housing. They just don't want it to block their view or affect their property values or affect traffic or have too many like pedestrians. It's like, well, what do you think comes with housing, right? So it's it's not going to be easy to come to a conclusion in this neighborhood. I feel like of all the sites, Adams has been the most difficult to get kind of a more, like a directed kind of, you know, I think Harmon Knolls is a site where there's kind of a general consensus in the community of what they want because of community meetings and historical reasons, but I don't think Adams really has a very clear, at least from a community perspective, very clear direction.
Mr. Chair, you're out of time for this section.
If there's no objection to continuing, we've run over our time, but if there's no objection, to continue the discussion for 15 minutes. Thank you, Don?
We've got ourselves a little bit of a dilemma here. We can talk about what ought to be there, what the community wants there. But if we're talking about the district itself, what can the district put there? As opposed to a private owner doing that. We can't control what a private owner, if we sell the property, the new owner gets to decide what goes on each one of these sites. Because they've got to fight with the city or the county about what the county or the city will allow them to put there, but it's outside of the purview of the school district and the school board to decide what the new owner can do there. Now, and we also have issues with at Adams, for instance, if the county wanted to purchase the property to use for a fire training facility, for instance, as a government body, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't they have the right of first refusal to put in a bid for that kind of site?
Only if you're gonna do it on a sale basis.
Well, again, the county would sell it, but not,
But
they wouldn't offer us fair market value, I'm sure.
well, I mean, maybe
Right.
not, but you know, again, if you're gonna go out on a public bid process, you're absolutely right. You don't have any say, so you're just saying, here's what the property is.
Yeah.
And you can have a minimum bid. But you know, the land use is, is gonna be determined by whoever acquires it, but that's not the case if you exchange the property. You can, and we do all the time, you're going to do this, and that's how, that's for the money, how we determine what the value of the property is, and you're gonna do that, and it's built into the agreement.
I want to talk about that in just a few seconds, but. What?
Go ahead, Don.
Okay, if the district wants to go into the real estate business, as far as workforce housing, that's a different story. Because the district would be in charge of that. They might have a developer that they're working with, but they likely would still retain the ownership or control over it.
I have one other possibility I'd like to have considered. Mr. Sheldon, are you familiar with improvements on leased land?
Very.
Is there any reason that the district could only sell rather than say, take an ILL, improvement on leased land, so that it would be a continuing flow of revenue to the district? And then the developer would develop the land and have a 99-year lease, but the district would retain ownership of the land.
And that would work for commercial type uses. It might work for high density residential that would be rental. It would not work for sale. Anything that was for sale, like a housing project or something like that. The other thing is that you're gonna not get the same value out of it because you're selling less than the full fee interest. So, and ground leases are very difficult to finance because it's in a subordinated position, or unsubordinated position. So any lender would be going in and making a loan and being in a second position behind the ground lease. Can it be done? Absolutely. We've done them. But it doesn't get rid of the, I still have to do something with this land.
Okay, thank you.
That's a methodology for doing something with it, but it doesn't negate the fact that none of the dynamics have changed on what the value of it is.
Okay.
But, no, point of order, isn't it the job of the committee to, assess the property by which it's zoned? And come up with, options for what it's zoned for, or if we just throw out hypotheticals and say, well, the zoning could be changed there.
Well, the zoning, you can change the zoning, that's done all the time.
It's not, not in Rich, not, at least not in Richmond.
Yeah.
It's easier said than
It
done.
can be done, it can be done. Now,
Okay,
sometimes it's
so we
heavier
can-
lift, but I look at, you know, when I'm looking at it, and I'll just share, I look at what is the appropriate land use. And, you know, would it be a shopping center site? No, it's not a shopping center site. Is it an industrial? No, because, you know, with like a big box type thing. For mini storage, yeah, I mean, it works, from that perspective. Is it a nice residential? Absolutely, except you've got all the issues with the ground and the earthquake and all the other, the fault. So I look at it more from, you know, what's the, respect the land. What's a good land use for it? And again, if it is a good land use, you have a much higher probability of having zoning change. And right now, the county is in the process of zoning it to residential.
So we're not bound by what we see here as R6 for Adams, right? So we can just,
It's better to throw out different ideas.
Right.
And there, some of them are gonna weed themselves out. That's how I like to do it.
okay,
Thank you. John?
Jim, Sam, and I been here for a while. We've heard your discussion about trading property. You know, but the newbies here have not, and I would think that at some point, we need to entertain that discussion and presentation. So that everybody in the group understands that as an option. Because they may not, I mean, I actually remember when Tony Wold brought you guys for the board 4 or 5 years ago and that's, I heard the presentation then too. But again, the 3 new people here, 4 new people, may not have heard it.
It's how it's disposed of is separate from the use of the property. In my humble opinion. You know, if we're talking about trading property, the idea of trading the property was again similar to the lease, the improvements on leased land. It was to generate a piece of income property to support the district in the long term, rather than one-time money, which then would have to be guarded to try and preserve its value in the long term. So that we could still support the facility improvement to facilities over time. But you're right, you know, it is something that we discussed that instead of having just a dollar amount dropped on the district, to have exchanged this particular piece of property for a piece of commercial property elsewhere in the district that then would help sustain the district.
Outside the district.
So, and again, what we've, you know, talked to several other committees that we've worked with is, Jim is absolutely right. It's a methodology for, you know, what I want to do, and how do I get there? But really, the fundamental question that the committee needs to look at is, do we just want to sell this? Do we want to keep it? And if we sell it, how do we want to do that? Do we want to get other income property? And that would be via an exchange, via a ground lease or some other way. And that can be a recommendation to the board. We'd like to dispose of this, but we want to use it as a trade property to acquire other property that are income producing. And that's, we put that in recommendations to the board. Again, it's an implementation.
Sam?
Can I propose that we have like a question with a yes or no answer here? You know, just so we can have some sort of like finality or reach some decisions, like for example, can we as a committee recommend Adams to be used as a school site? No. Okay, next question. If it's not used for a school site, shall we recommend it that it's a surplus site? Yes or no? Right? And I think we have not gotten to that point
Actually, we did,
that
February last year.
this body hasn't, but yes.
With the new.
Okay, but we're still the same body. may have new members, but we are still the same
So-
body.
Assuming we still believe that way, which honestly, not to be a jerk, but I mean, if we had to vote on it again, we have a majority of those on the committee who were here last year. So if it came to a vote, we would probably all agree, and even if the new members didn't agree, we would have, you know, we would have a majority vote anyways in that regard. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a moot point to discuss it at this point, but I do want to bring it up, whether or not if we've decided that it is, and if there's an opportunity to overturn that, this would be the time to do it.
Well, let me follow on with your idea and entertain a motion to declare the site surplus. So, because I have down here, so it says discussion of priority uses and discussion with possible action on our agenda.
D3.
So we can, if I'm correct. Yep. Entertain a motion to declare the site surplus and just start from there.
Perfect.
Or, affirm, in the case of, for purposes of our committee, reaffirm our decision in our earlier, composition as a committee.
It's best as a new motion.
That's just a motion.
I'm sorry, if you've already got a motion that has been passed to accomplish what he's saying. You're saying,
Yeah,
From a parliamentary point of view, because time has changed, membership has changed, it is better that, because they're not gonna be competing, we pass it as a new motion. We would adopt it as a new motion.
I'm having a tough time embracing myself that everything that happened prior to March fifth is null and void? Is that what you're
Mr. Chair, I
suggesting?
did not say that
No,
at all,
no, no.
at all.
No. Done.
So. My
Sorry, but
question would be,
also-
Are you gonna make the motion for all 4 properties or just one at a
Just
time?
one at a time.
But also, the correction there, we are not making a decision. All we can do is make a recommendation to the board. The board decides whether it's surplus. We're an advisory board.
Board would decide that the recommendation would be it is surplus.
Okay.
That's what your motion is.
So let us rephrase this, all right? So I will entertain a motion that the committee recommends the site formerly known as Adams Middle School be declared surplus by the Board of Education.
Can we rephrase that to our recommendation to the board? Is that it's declared surplus?
Are you making the motion?
Sure, I would recommend,
I move.
I move that, that we recommend to the Board of Education that Adams is declared surplus.
I second that motion.
Discussion? Comment, discussion, question? Okay, well, take, a roll call vote.
Any public comment on it?
If there are no, do I need?
You need to ask whether there's any comment from the public.
Oh, okay. No
There are no
hands are
hands at
raised.
this time.
If there are no objections,
Uh,
then it's been moved and seconded that Adams, that we recommend to the Board of Trustees that Adams is a surplus site. Without objections, so adopted. Let's move on. The next one is Harmon Knolls. And I have the difficulty declaring that, certainly in my own mind, declaring that a surplus site. It's a buildable site. There is a need in the area. If anyone else would like to, move to declare Harmon Knolls a surplus site.
I think it should be saved. I don't think it's surplus.
Then,
Hilltop Mall will be built out. There'll be
Then-
families there.
okay, so Art, is it, your motion is that we recommend that Harmon Knolls be reserved?
I recommend that Harmon Knolls be reserved.
Is that a motion?
A recommendation or motion.
So
I
I
make
make,
a motion.
I move. We actually say I move.
I move.
Perfect.
So, is there a second?
Thank you very much.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that Harmon Knolls be preserved as a possible site for, the school in the future? If there are no objections,
Is there discussion?
discussion?
I mean, for the record,
Hold on, Go back. We have a, there's steps, so. For a second, you wanna go to discussion without, instead of objections, we go back to the motion maker first. Yes, you have the right to speak first to your motion.
Well, originally it was, Herman Knowles was, the site was scheduled to be, rebuilt as, Highland Elementary, which is a 67-year-old school. And, its proximity to Hilltop Mall, makes it, attractive once, Hilltop Mall is built out. They're estimating over 1,000 to 2,000 homes be, built in Hilltop Mall. And the closest school, there's a charter school, so kids will need a school to go to. And if the property is preserved, then future down the road, maybe 10 years from now, 20 years, who knows? We may be able to build a school, rebuild a school, or build a school on that site. That's my rationale.
Our time was, coming to a close. I'd like to extend time for 5 minutes. Okay. If there are no objections. Okay. Continuing the discussion on Harlan Knowles. Don, you had your hand up?
Yes, I do. Yes, that community needs a new school. I'm not objecting to that, not arguing with that. But I'm looking at the reality. You cannot build a new school unless you've got some money, a lot of money. Sorry, you want to interrupt me?
No.
Okay, and the reality is that of the bond program, as we don't have that money, and we are not going to have that money for a very long time, for a couple of reasons. Yeah, we would have to pass another bond measure on there. And right now, the people of West Contra Costa County have very little faith in the school district and in the school board. Doesn't matter who's on the school board. When it comes to passing another bond measure. And the bond measure would have to be so restrictive about what it would be used for. That the good people of Hercules, Pinole, okay, El Cerrito, Kensington, and most of the unincorporated areas, the 8 unincorporated areas, why would they vote to tax themselves for another 30 to 40 years minimum to pay for a bond measure where they're not gonna see a single penny of that money going towards them? There's no school, none of the money would be used for this, for schools in those areas on there. But now we've also got a debt limit. The district cannot be indebted more than 2.5% of the total valuation of all of the properties in West Contra Costa County. We get a yearly debt waiver limit. That usually puts it up around 4%. We're right there. And so we've got to be able to pay back a tremendous amount of that debt before we can even put another bond measure on the ballot. And so I'm saying a good 10, 12, maybe 15 years before that is a possibility. I'm sorry, you want to interrupt me?
We're running short on time, Don, so.
Okay, you go ahead.
No,
You want to shut me down, that's fine. I don't think I've got the votes on this. I know that, but I need to be able to go on record. But I also want to make sure to go on record saying that I wasn't able to complete my argument because we're out of time.
I also want to go on the record that while building a new school sounds great and the population increases, eventually will lead to property taxes that could fund a school down the road. Without any concrete housing plans and without any like developer committing to these plans. Saving this property to build a school when the community really does make a lot of use out of this park. With a community with limited park access, I think is also something we are being short-sighted of. The reason why that's a desirable neighborhood partially is because of access to a park, because of quality of life amenities like access to a park. So while, you know, I think a school could be nice at some point, I don't think realistically at this moment, I can recommend that it would remain, as, I can't safely I have to recommend that surplus at the moment, given the circumstances.
Anyone else?
Well, I have to disagree with that because we don't know what the future is gonna bring and, that is, that's my neighborhood. It's a low income neighborhood. It's probably the lowest of all the areas. And, that park is leased from the city. It's our only park. So, and there are no other areas that we can put a park in that neighborhood. I've lived there since 65, I know. I just think that, the community deserves, a new school one day, and if we can reserve that property for 10, 15 years, then we won't have to look for another, area to build a new elementary school.
So if they surplus the property, then they can move on with the park. But if they reserve the property, then it only can be the school. There's no leasing to the city for park uses.
There are two separate parcels. I mean, there's one big parcel,
Right.
but the consultants
get the
divide the
part.
parcel into two parts.
Mhm.
One part is, used for recreation at the moment, the other part is simply bare land. And it is buildable. My personal feeling is that once we recommend the sale of the property and some developer purchases it, then it's gone forever. So I just think in terms of short-sightedness, it's a little bit short-sighted to dispose of the one buildable site.
So if
At
it's
this time.
surplus doesn't mean fail.
It does, exactly. Surplus would actually initiate the process of, all the different agencies you have to go through to first bid before it would get to the public, right?
Well, or my understanding was or lease, right? Surplus, correct me if I'm wrong, but surplus is that we don't think it's usable for a school,
Yeah.
not that the district gives up ownership.
Right.
And so I think this is where I feel really torn, because I think Sam's point is the recreation for the area could actually be increased by surplusing the property if down the road that was the direction we went. And fiscally, for the district, it is gonna be a long time. And surplusing this property doesn't mean that there couldn't be a school rebuilt. It just wouldn't be rebuilt on that parcel.
Mr. Chair, we are out of time again on this item.
I'm wondering if,
We
because I
need a
think this is.
motion or to go to the vote before we can extend time. You can
That's
absolutely
actually not what I
extend
was
time.
gonna say. I was gonna say, I think because this conversation is
extend time.
fruitful and it's the meat, it probably makes sense to pause and continue this discussion in the next meeting. And because I think people have a lot to think about.
Is that motion?
So I make a
We have,
motion to pause this conversation and continue it in the next meeting.
we have one on the floor, which is Art's motion.
Actually, because we're out of time, if we make the motion, if we
Postpone.
have the motion to postpone, if that gets a second, then all of this carries forward to the next.
Second.
So we have a motion to postpone.
So, all right, if there are no objections, then we'll pause this discussion and hold it again, continue it on the 23rd of April, next week. All right, well, I thought this would take some time. Okay. So, everyone has some materials that were passed